Get started, shall we? So, there was an event last week called the DNC. Apparently, a bunch of these really big shot Democrats went out there, and a lot of them seem to not really focus on one of the big elephants in the room, which is how Democrats have been treating the Gaza issue, or the Palestinian question, maybe, is another way of phrasing that, which is that they have just been deafeningly silent or making very milquetoast statements about, oh yes, we want peace everywhere. We want peace everywhere. Kind of statements that don't ultimately mean anything except for like virtue signaling. Well, here is how simple it can be to actually just put out a statement that says, hey, we need a ceasefire. Here's the thing we do to make that happen. We want this outcome. Here is the action we can take to affect that outcome. And it is made in approximately 5 seconds by one Ilhan Omar.
So if you really wanted a ceasefire, you just stop sending the weapons. It is that simple. So if
yeah, you want a ceasefire? Then stop sending the 5-ton munitions, the half-ton munitions that are being used to blow up tents of refugees. It's really that simple. But unfortunately, instead, the DNC decided to really embrace an unarticulated policy of, we're not going to have any Palestinians on the stage. And that seems incredibly weird to me. To me, it comes across as like having a policy of, oh, yeah, we accept everyone here at the DNC, except we're not going to allow those Swedes on the stage. Those filthy Swedes are going to say something inconvenient to us, so we aren't going to allow them to speak. Do you guys understand how insane that sounds? Do you guys understand how high-key bigoted it sounds? Oh, we're not going to allow any Mexicans to speak at the DNC this year. If you had that articulated policy, everyone would be like, that seems hella racist. You're not going to allow Mexicans to speak? Why? You would, every journalist for miles around, for months, would ask, hey, why weren't you allowing Mexicans to speak on the stage? Instead, it's just kind of like a shrug. It's like, oh yeah, of course. Palestinians are different. They're different. It seems racist because it is racist. Ding, ding, ding. You did it.
Perfect.
You got it. And this policy, which took a lot of people by surprise, including the uncommitted movement, which, as many of you know, the uncommitted movement was a surprisingly successful leftist organization that organized around voting uncommitted in primaries in order to send a message to the Democratic Party that, hey, people aren't going to turn out for you in the general if you keep doing nothing about the issue of Palestine, the issue of Gaza. Well, this was how the uncommitted movement responded to how the DNC treated them.
These past 10 months have been...
It's literally Palestinian folks mourning on the floor of the DNC, okay? People who have lost family members, friends in Gaza, in tears at the DNC because they don't even get a voice on the stage. Republicans got voices on the stage of the Democratic National Convention. Republicans got invited to speak, but not Democratic representatives or Democratic officials in the party who are going to vote for Kamala Harris, who happen to be Palestinian. when Wolf Blitzer on CNN is out there saying, hey, this seems kind of weird that you guys aren't allowing Palestinians to speak. What's up with that? Like, when you have Wolf Blitzer on CNN asking that question, you've royally screwed the pooch. Okay?
At this convention, as you know, what a leader of the so-called uncommitted movement said today after they were denied a speaking slot for a Palestinian American. Watch this and then we'll discuss.
My guest told me that the Democratic Party provided me and my community a voice at the table. And what has happened here at the Democratic National Convention undid all of that. I was just told that I don't have a voice here in this party.
You heard what she said. Is this going to potentially hurt Kamala Harris in a state like Michigan, which has a significant Arab American, Muslim American population?
Well, look, the vice president's proud to have engaged with the leadership of this movement, including in Michigan just a little while ago when she was visiting the battleground state there. They have a right to have their voice heard, and we've been proud in this convention to engage them through dedicated conversations and meetings and everything. But I think the really important thing to think about, too, is what is the vice president doing about it? She's working with President Biden, even in the middle of the political.
Yeah, we talked with them, and we felt that we gave them enough of a voice by not allowing them to speak.
Fanfare of a convention to try to get to a deal, to try to end the war, to try to get to a permanent ceasefire, to try to protect the people who are suffering and who need humanitarian assistance, and to, of course, make sure Israel has a right to defend themselves. That is what she's focused on, and that is so different from what we could see from President Trump, who, when he was in the White House, all he did was foster chaos and division around the world, kiss up to dictators, abandon our allies. These are things that we can't afford to go back to. And so when it comes to tonight, when she'll speak to the country, she'll talk about the kind of global leadership that she would bring to the White House, including on the war in the Middle East.
So why?
This bald white man is one of Kamala Harris's senior advisors.
Why was a Palestinian American denied a speaking slot tonight?
Well, I think that we've given them a lot of opportunities to engage in this process at the convention. People have had dedicated.
Oh, why were they denied a speaking slot, though? Says the undeterred Wolf Blitzer's like, oh, but why aren't you giving a speaking slot to a Palestinian? Do you know how badly you have to fuck up for Wolf Blitzer to hold your feet to the fire like this? This is basically him pulling a gun. That's the equivalent, okay? Wolf Blitzer is tussling, okay?
Panels, for example, during the daytime programming here at the convention to talk about these issues. We're, of course, continuing to engage with the group and make sure that, that the vice president's position on this issue is heard and that their voices are heard and reflected in our convention.
Ian Sams, thanks very much for joining us.
So, this guy just lied. Like, this is what is called lying. And also, fundamentally not answering the question. Well, we feel that we offered them enough. Well, clearly you didn't, and you're, putting cops, Republican cops on stage to talk about Kamala Harris. You can't give one of your own Democrat supporters, who is Palestinian, some time to speak? That's crazy. That's crazy. The thing that got them more media attention than anything was staging their sit-in protest. So I just want to say, hey guys, let's give the uncommitted leadership their due. Let's give them their time, okay? And thank God for Zateo and Mehdi Hassan, who is they're doing incredible work, okay? And Mehdi Hassan sat down at a round table with the chair and co-chair of Uncommitted, as well as one of the uncommitted representatives who's Palestinian, who was going to speak at the DNC and then was denied a speaking spot.
Are we going to see a Palestinian voice on stage at this DNC?
The whole point of any of this, it's about being able to show there is room in the party for us too.
At the end of the day, Mehdi, who is our most important other? It's our Palestinian cousins. This thing has been going on for decades, for generations.
Party platform stated that the Democratic Party values Palestinian and Israeli lives equally. How did they signal that this week?
If I texted the WhatsApp groups that I'm in right now and I said, I need you to vote for Kamala Harris after what just happened this week, they're literally going to tell me I have no shame.
As a representative, elected representative, to I'm sure many Palestinian Americans who come up to you and say, what are you doing in that party?
Yeah, I really thought I could take something back after this week. And now I don't know what I'm going to say to them.
Mehdi Hassan's one of the
Welcome
best
to a very
movies.
special episode of Mehdi Unfiltered. I'm Mehdi Hassan. We're here at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. Actually, we're around the corner from the convention center at a brand new Palestinian American-owned cafe here in Chicago called Oud Coffee and Cafe. It's amazing. I urge you to check it out if you are in town. Where better to discuss the Democrats and the uncommitted movement than here, the pro-Palestine, anti-war, uncommitted movement, which secured more than 700.
Worshipper of Olympians, why did the DNC do that? Why? Who knows why? I want to know why. The response to that is the DNC is spineless and cowardly. Like, frankly, I feel like that's the reason, mixed with a hefty handful of spite. Essentially, they're afraid of a Palestinian speaker going off script and saying something incredibly inflammatory that might anger AIPAC donors. AIPAC has over $100 million it's prepared to drop into this election. It has been dropping obscene amounts of money on primarying politicians. These politicians are scared about that. Also, many people are ideologically Zionist in the Democratic Party. Again, this has been largely accepted by both Democrats and Republicans. It's why AIPAC is able to wield so much power, because for a very long time, people just were like, oh, this is basically free money for my campaign. And like, this bill will never come due. I will never have to do anything for this money. You know, they just want me to support Israel. And, I don't know much about what's going on over there, but, I could support a country for money. That's fine. Like, how often is that going to be relevant? And then like something like this pops off and it's like, oh, wait, that's the bill coming due. And unfortunately, there's been such a long period of time for AIPAC to kind of build power and build these connections and build like the political machine it wields, that a lot of politicians are suddenly feeling trapped. Like they have a political gun to their heads that they are only now discovering is there.
100,000 votes in the Democratic Party primaries earlier this year, more than 100,000 in Michigan alone, and has sent 30 delegates from 8 states to the DNC, and yet none of them have been up on the DNC stage. We haven't heard from an uncommitted speaker. We haven't heard from a Palestinian speaker. So who better to discuss all of this than with my special panel tonight. Layla Al-Abid is one of the founders of the National Uncommitted Movement from Dearborn, Michigan, longtime community organizer. Roa Rahman is a Democratic state representative from Georgia, from Atlanta, the first Palestinian American, first Muslim American woman elected to the Georgia House of Representatives. And Andy Levin, former 2-term Democratic congressman from Michigan, a progressive, I should add, a Jewish critic of Israel who locked horns, I think, had a good fight with AIPAC in the past. Brilliant panel here to talk about a very important subject. Here we are at the DNC in Chicago, Wednesday, penultimate night.
There are a lot of John Fettermans.
Are we going to see
DNC.
uncommitted on stage? Have a speaker? Are we going to see a Palestinian voice on stage at this DNC?
Well, in the most latest update that we've had, literally moments ago, we received an answer to our demand to have a Palestinian speaker, or have a speaker that can provide that very human impact testimony of our U.S. policy decisions. We demanded that the DNC allow Dr. Tanya Haj Hassan to fulfill that role. We have asked the DNC to allow Palestinian electeds to fulfill that role. People like Ru'a and Abdel Nasser Rashid, right here from Chicago.
Yeah, trains and bullshit. It's almost like lobbying should probably be pretty illegal, and it should be double super illegal to lobby on behalf of a foreign government. Yeah, like I feel like maybe we should get money out of politics. I don't know. I think maybe that'd be a good thing to pursue.
electeds within their own party, Palestinian electeds within their own party. And we've just heard word that the answer is no.
Yeah.
That
The DNC have said officially.
And the answer remained no. We can now say in retrospect.
No.
Officially, the answer is no.
Was there a chance before? Was there a negotiation underway?
We thought we had been doing those negotiations for the last several days. We were being told it's a good thing. There's not a no answer. There's not a yes answer. Keep giving us names. Keep giving us names. We have given them names of electeds. We have given them names of Palestinian Americans who have family in Gaza. We have given them names of Palestinian Americans who have lost family members in Gaza. All to come to this moment of like, no, it's not going to happen.
And you mentioned one of the people you had suggested was Roa Rahman, who's Georgia State Representative. You are Palestinian American. What does it feel to you tonight to see no Palestinian American on stage at the DNC?
It actually is illegal to lobby for a foreign government, incredibly illegal, but Israel gets a pass under the veil of American-Israeli relations. Well, yeah, but like the same way it's illegal to directly give gifts to politicians, and yet, billions get spent on lobbying. It is kind of like illegal stuff like that goes on all the time. Guys, remember how Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, got put in charge of Middle East foreign policy? And then after he left office, inexplicably, the Saudi Arabian government transferred I think $2 billion into his brand new investment firm, despite the fact that it had no proven track record, despite the fact that Saudi Arabia's own government accountants were like, this seems like an incredibly bad investment. And then no one looked into that. There was no investigation into the incredibly weird, seeming corruption at play there. And yeah, just it's one of those things where all the time in Washington, even things that go beyond the pale into clearly illegal territory, that these things don't get investigated. You have to basically be like Bob Menendez and take comical, gold bar payments from foreign officials under the table, like you're a evil Mr. Monopoly, which is a misnomer. That's just Mr. Monopoly. You have to be like a cartoon villain with how obvious you are.
See, in the midst of this brutal assault, people are still being killed, even as the DNC is going on. We had an Israeli hostage member's family on stage, which I think we all support. We all want the hostages released from Gaza, but no space for a Palestinian American voice such as yourself. You're an elected Democratic lawmaker. You're not some outsider. You're not an agitator. You're a lawmaker.
Yeah, I'm very much a rule follower, thanks to my mom. She's really drilled it into me, which has made it very, trying to keep the straight and narrow.
So you rush the stage then?
Unfortunately, I don't think I have that kind of bravery. But, it is definitely very disappointing because, one, I want to be very clear. I'm so honored that you all even put me on that list. I mean, I took that very, very seriously. But at the same time, I don't think people understand the reason we are here. The whole point of any of this, it's not about who is on that stage. It's about being able to show there is room in the party for us too. We have heard from Republicans this week. We have heard from so many different stakeholders. Our tent has now become massive, including, by the way, Republicans from my state. And to think that those Republicans are allowed a bigger platform in my own party than me as an elected official who all I want to talk about is our stories, about why we are there, and the vision and the future that we think we can reach, the promise that the Democratic Party can reach in this historic moment. And instead we're being told, once again, no.
Andy, you were a member of Congress for 2 terms. You've been in the Democratic Party for a long time. Why? What do you think is the reasoning in the DNC and the Harris campaign? Are they just worried about this issue being in prime time?
I don't really know, Mehdi, but I'm disappointed because...
And that's kind of the thing, right? A lot of people aren't going to talk about what's going on behind the scenes right now, But I would wager a pretty strong guess that the DNC is riddled with people who are ideologically similar to Joe Biden, who have like an ideologically Zionist stance on the issue, and who, seeing an opportunity to snub pro-Palestinian voices, take it because they're vindictive assholes, and also to a lesser extent because they're worried about what might be said. That's probably the justification that they give to more sympathetic ears in the DNC, like sympathetic ears to the pro-Palestinian movement. But at the end of the day, it's spiteful, vindictive politics towards leftists, which frankly, that's kind of par for the course for liberals. That is how liberals treat leftists, whether it's on economic issues or geopolitical issues.
I think, look at if you saw Bernie Sanders' speech, the biggest, but he didn't just say end the horrifying war in Gaza. It was the biggest.
Yeah, you can see why people want to call the government of the United States a Zionist-occupied government, but I'm not going to. Yeah, it's probably a bad idea to use terms originating from like the neo-Nazi movement in your criticism of Zionist policy. I agree. That's a good move. It's a good move to avoid those terms.
Applause line in his speech. You know, the Democratic base, Jewish, Arab American, you know, African American, all of our amazing rainbow, like, you know, we're talking about the tent.
Yes.
Really, there's a strong feeling across all the different, you know, parts of our party that we need a real ceasefire to end this horrifying violence. And let me just say it. Before we came, I was able to see the hostage parents. You know, they're from Chicago. I didn't know anything about it before I saw them. So moved. Everybody in that hall is crying. I was super moved by it. You know, I think the Democratic Party has to talk about the fact that we had a way better chance of getting more hostages out alive by not having this terrible war. Yes. The Israeli Defense Forces have said that some of these hostages seem to have likely been killed when the IDF, blew up tunnels.
Just this week, 5 of the 6 bodies that were brought back apparently allegedly killed by the IDF.
Right. So, you know, it wasn't even a good strategy for that. Why can't we talk about these things? But look, I also am a little bit, you know, I have 2 really different perspectives on this. One is just as a person, a Jew of faith who takes my faith seriously, you know, the Torah says, our Bible says 36 times some version, a mitzvah, a requirement, what we need to do, that, you know, love the strangers, yourself, the other. There's different formulations, yes. Right? 36 is a significant number for us. 18, you know, it's a double high. You know, there's a lot to it. Who is the most important? At the end of the day, Mehdi, who is our most important other? It's our Palestinian cousins. This thing has been going on for decades, for generations. And I believe Kamala Harris can change course and face it. But, and so I'm sure we'll talk about policy too, yeah. But I do think it was, if this is the decision, I think it's a mistake. Not, look at, I just met Rua, like this amazing state legislator from Georgia. And I guess the uncommitted movement, let her speak. Yeah. The uncommitted movement, I guess, gave a lot of options. You know, that Dr. Tanya, that was the same doctor on our panel on Monday. Oh my goodness.
She was on Christian Amanpour's CNN show. But good enough for CNN, but not the DNC.
She is so compelling and she's totally non-political.
Yes.
You know, so anyway, it's
for those of you who don't know who they're talking about here, Dr. Tanya is a doctor who went to Gaza and served the people there.
A panel, as we heard, focused on Palestinian human rights, which brought the topic to the DNC for the very first time. Among the speakers, my next guest, Dr. Tanya Haj Hassan.
Can we just take a moment? Christian Amanpour is like one of the best in the biz. Like in mainstream media, like, she's one of the best reporters working. Like, she actually seems to do journalism, despite having like a headlining name and like the ability to like get shows off the ground. Like, she's not content to like sit on her laurels. She like still goes out and does stuff. Like, she's a more mainstream Amy Goodman, frankly, and we're very lucky to have her in our corner. But like, so underappreciated, IMO.
Moving many in the crowd to tears as she described what she had seen inside Gaza when she worked there as a medic in March. Dr. Tanya Haj Hassan, welcome to the program. We just heard before you came on from State Senator Mallory McMorrow, who was quite moved and went to quite, lengths to tell us about this panel. Tell me about the panel that you took part in. What was it designed to do? Are you satisfied with what you were able to do during that panel?
Thanks, Christian. As multiple American doctors and physicians who've all come for the same purpose. In fact, I don't know a single physician or surgeon or healthcare worker who's been to Gaza in the past 10 months that doesn't come back with the same very urgent message. We've been trained to protect and preserve human life, but the Israeli military campaign is targeting life and everything needed to sustain it in Gaza, and that renders our work as physicians impossible. This morning, I'm here with a number of American doctors, surgeons who just held a press conference here at the McCormick Center in Chicago. I had contacted a few of them a couple weeks ago saying that we wanted to come and speak at the Democratic National Convention to try and see if we can pressure the U.S. to take a different position to finally put down an arms embargo or and pressure an end to this military campaign. And the overwhelming response from every single person I contacted was, yes, absolutely, we're coming. I work for Doctors Without Borders, Médecins Sans Frontières, and in the Rwandan genocide, they said genocide calls for a radical immediate response. Doctors cannot stop genocide. And I think a lot of us feel the same way. We are so horrified by what we witness. It haunts us in our dreams. Dr. Mark Perlmutter, a Jewish American surgeon who was there, sent a message for us to deliver today. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here for work obligations. But he said parents come to him in his dreams and stare at him, wondering why he didn't do more to stop their children from being killed. And I cannot count the number of children, Christian, that died under my care in Gaza from US-made bombs falling on their homes, on the places they have been displaced to multiple times. And I think the purpose that...
This is the woman that the DNC denied to speak, by the way. This is one of the people put forward as someone who could go to the DNC and speak the truth about what's happening in Gaza. I've already said like a few things about why they're spiteful. They're worried about what might be said and how that might affect policy. And also, and I do think that this is a not insignificant reason, they wanted this to be a happy, fun, lighthearted coronation of Kamala Harris. And having a speaker talk about war crimes and dead children, well, that harshes the mellow. You're harshing the vibes. Can't have that. And it's disgusting. Hiding your head in the sand to avoid the truth about something horrible that you are complicit in, that's actually what harshes the vibes. Inaction in the face of atrocity is what harshes the vibes.
The reason I was here, and the reason I think many of my colleagues have turned up, is because we wouldn't be able to live with ourselves if we thought we hadn't done everything possible to stop this.
And Doctor, do you feel, and you've sent in pictures, and we've seen, and we've had reports from our correspondents throughout this, terrible 10 months about what's unfolding in Gaza, even though international reporters cannot get in. I mean, they're really heroic Palestinians who are working with our international colleagues to get this story out. Do you feel that what you said and the way the panel was received made any inroads? Because it seems from where we sit, there's literally no chance in hell that there's going to be an arms embargo or anything on Israel.
Christiane, I wish I could contradict you. I'm a rational person, and I have been coming on the news for 10 months, repeating the same messages of urgency over and over again, and I haven't seen significant change in the American position on this. You know, for the ongoing and unconditional U.S. military support for Israel in this military campaign, it starkly contrasts with documented realities on the ground, with what me and my colleagues have personally witnessed, what every single person I know who's been to Gaza in the last 10 months has come out saying, what the International Court of Justice is calling, have findings indicating it's plausible genocide, with the repeated global condemnation from every human rights and humanitarian organization. So I want to contradict you and say that the fact that there's so many people here delivering the same message, the fact that in essence the U.S. is breaking its own laws and international law by continuing to fund this, that these things are going to change the position. I hope it will. History is watching us, and I know I wouldn't be able to live with myself if I were in the position of these decision makers and continued to fund this.
The pictures that we've just shown are some of the ones that you sent from your time in the hospital there in March.
The bloody footprints on the ground, to me, that's an image that's going to stick with me for a long time. When you have a hospital hospital system that's so poorly equipped that people don't have shoes, and that blood runs freely on the ground, and just trails of bare, bloodied feet go through the hospital, that's the fact that we are complicit with this is unspeakably evil.
There are, according to the Gaza authorities, more than 40,000 now is the death toll. We don't know exactly how many are civilians and how many are militants, but certainly we see the images of civilians who are most definitely, killed and wounded in this. What gives you hope? Is it the protests outside? Is it the uncommitted movement in the Democratic Party, which sent a clear signal during the primaries and continues to send it? There are delegates of uncommitted, this uncommitted group in terms of their protest there in Chicago. What gives you hope?
So, Christiane, I mean, you're right. Just going back to what you said, there are tens of thousands of people who've been killed. So many of those children. I think when you look at the death toll in Gaza, it reflects the demographics of the population. It tells you how indiscriminate these attacks have been. This military assault has broken all the worst types of records: highest number of humanitarian workers killed, record numbers of journalists killed, record numbers of healthcare workers killed, over 500 healthcare workers in Gaza killed to date, including many of my colleagues, people I knew personally. And this isn't even mentioning all the healthcare workers that have been detained, tortured. We're hearing reports of physical, psychological, and sexual torture. I spoke to a few of them who've been released because they have no crime to be held for, and they describe the worst kinds of abuse. What gives me hope? I think, I spoke with one of my Gazan colleagues yesterday on the phone. He's a pain and rehabilitation doctor who's an Oxford graduate, like myself. I knew him in Oxford, and I've also seen him multiple times in Gaza on my visits there. And he had some very sad messages to share, including some, I asked him if there's anything he wanted me to share, and he said, tell them that children around me are wishing for death because they would rather die than go on
We've
living
heard
here,
that, and it is.
in these unlivable circumstances.
I mean, each time I hear that from somebody
Sorry.
like yourself and somebody who's on the ground, it is very shocking to hear children who say that. And I just want to ask you from your perspective, you were there for, I don't know, a month or so in a specific hospital in Gaza in March. The war was raging. The Israelis say that they follow the laws of war and they do their best to avoid civilian casualties.
Yeah, they're lying.
Is there anything that you were able to see from your perspective that leads you to believe that that is the case?
Excellent question.
Christiane, I'll tell you what I saw, and then I'll let you and your viewers conclude what you may. The emergency department is filled with families. I'm a pediatric intensive care doctor. My subspecialty is, my specialty is children. My subspecialty is children who are critically unwell or ill or injured.
There's a hospital still in Gaza? Well, anywhere gets turned into a hospital when people are injured and you have doctors. I wouldn't say there are functional hospitals left in Gaza, but there are still, you know, the hollowed out husks of buildings that parents take their dying children to in the hope that maybe someone can save them. You know, it's not. They don't have enough medicine. They don't have food. Children are literally starving to death. It's
and I was instrumental in the emergency department. I was running around all over the place. They kept on calling me because in every corner of the resuscitation bay, there were children fighting for their life. And that in and of itself tells you how little to nothing is being done to preserve civilian life. It's the families that I spoke to are living in apartment buildings. They're living in tents. I had a patient who was bulldozed in her tent and crushed and died. I have a woman in the ICU.
Yeah, can we just say, like, if Israel was taking the steps to protect civilian life, there wouldn't be a circumstance where a bulldozer crushes someone to death. That's not like maybe you can make an argument for like, oh man, the drone dropped the bomb in the wrong place. Whoopsie daisy, that's our bad. But bulldozers aren't fast, guys. You don't accidentally crush someone to death in a bulldozer.
Who came to visit her 6-year-old daughter who had severe brain damage from the missile that fell on her home. She said she was just in the middle of prayer when it happened. Her husband works at a dairy factory, and her infant child was killed in the same attack. A pregnant woman wheeled in 7 days postpartum, speechless, just staring vacantly. Her husband with her, telling me that she delivered 7 days ago and that the baby she delivered is somewhere trapped under the rubble. I was turning left, right, and center amongst entire families whose lives have been destroyed in a single second. So to say that, you know, everything is being done to protect civilian lives, I mean,
yes, Doctor, I hear you.
I think your viewers are more intelligent than that.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Dr. Tanya Haj Hassan.
It's bleak. But that's who the uncommitted movement was lobbying to get the DNC to allow to speak. That woman, that pediatric specialist who served in Gaza for a month and just saw unspeakable atrocity after unspeakable atrocity. And the DNC said no. Under no circumstances.
So, disappointing to me.
So let me ask you this: you actually met with Kamala Harris briefly in a kind of rope line before the rally in Michigan about, what was it now, 10 days there? I can't keep track of days anymore. I just got to ask you, as a Palestinian on this panel with Ruah. There's a whole debate about Palestinian invisibility. And Ta-Nehisi Coates, one of the great writers of our time, has just written a piece for Vanity Fair.
Yeah, who I met yesterday.
And he's saying very openly that there's no Palestinians on stage because they don't want to hear from them, they don't want to see them, they're very uncomfortable. They being the party leadership. How do you?
Well, yeah, like it is spite, and it is also a level of discomfort with the culpability. You know, like no one wants to be told that they're responsible for the deaths of children. You know, no one wants to be told that. And a lot of people would rather bury their heads in the sand than accept any amount of discomfort on that front.
How do you feel as a Palestinian within this movement, someone who got up close personally with the vice president, who's someone who clearly has empathy for people in trouble, is a woman of color? How did you feel, I wonder, when you met with her?
When I met with her, I felt that her empathy and her compassion towards me was very authentic and genuine.
Same. Yeah.
And it was in a very emotional moment for me to sit there and face Vice President Kamala Harris and tell her that Michigan voters want to be able to vote for her, but we can't do that with a policy that doesn't save the lives of people we love, the lives of Palestinians who are the very reflection of our own community here in the United States. These are people that share the same names of my own children.
Yes.
And although she was very compassionate, very genuine, she listened to what I had to say. I told her about the tens to hundreds of family members that my community members are losing each day in Gaza because of our tax dollars. And she said it's horrific. And I asked her, will you meet with us to discuss an arms embargo? And she said she would meet with us. She didn't say she would, agree to an arms embargo.
And her advisors very quickly came out the next day and said she doesn't support arms embargo.
And we know that. That's why we said we want to discuss with you an arms embargo.
I do have a bit of sympathy with Kamala Harris on this point. I do think at this point, it's probably not possible, even if she did support an arms embargo, for her to come out and say that, largely because there are now, her being a front runner for the presidency, there are a lot of geopolitical ramifications for that. I mentioned this last night, but it's entirely possible, given the precariousness of Netanyahu's position, that if he gets wind that the United States, should Kamala Harris be elected, will rescind its support, it could be that he takes more and more erratic action in the Middle East to try and bait Iran or Hezbollah into all-out war. It already seems like he's been doing that with increasing intensity. So I think that is a very real issue with like how she communicates and comports herself. And I don't know, and this is why I think largely we're not going to get any clear idea of her policy regarding Gaza and Israel until it's like down to the wire, like a week out from the election, unfortunately. Which doesn't instill me with a great degree of confidence in her position, but I also understand that like this is one of the unfortunate realities of playing geopolitics. It's how the game works.
Because we know that is not the current policy, but the current policy right now does not actually get us a ceasefire.
So you are in the uncommitted movement. You are here at the DNC pressuring from within. It's insider-outsider strategy.
That'd be really cool, Ms. Milena, but I'm
Ruah,
not going to hold my breath for it.
Member of the House of Representatives. You're a Democratic lawmaker. What do you both say? What do you say as a representative, elected representative, to, I'm sure, many Palestinian Americans who come up to you and say, what are you doing in that party? We're invisible to that party. We're not represented. They don't care about us. What do you say to them?
I'm going to be honest with you. I really thought I could take something back after this week.
Yeah.
And now I don't know what I'm going to say to them.
Yeah.
I really don't, because, none of us expect to change 80 years worth of policy, in the course of a single election cycle. That is absolutely not the, current ask. That is not what is being demanded. What is being.
I do think, though, what we are seeing is a historic shift in support among Democrats, at the very least. Like a first in 80-year shift if not in policy, but in support of better policy. And my hope is that that shift in support will lead to better policy positions being embraced by politicians in the near future. I don't know if that will happen this election cycle, but what I do know is that the mythology of Israel as like this righteous, upright nation is shattered in the American consciousness. For the vast majority of Democrats, at least. And I don't think that that is going to be fixed. Like, I don't think any amount of Israeli PR is going to fix that perception anymore. And I think that is good.
Demanded at the most basic fundamental level is that for those of us who have given so much for this party, because again, I've been an organizer for 10 years, 8 years longer than I've been an elected official. I have knocked doors. I personally knocked doors for President Biden in Forsyth County in the cold on my own because I firmly believe that we could not have Trump again. Yeah. I am somebody who's turned out, at this point, tens of thousands of voters for the party. I'm in a swing state and I've done it consistently. And when somebody tells me, what are you doing in that party? I used to be able to say, this is the only party, the only one that at least strives to do the right thing. No, but there is no singular perfect party. But our tent is big enough that I can see myself in it and that it matches my values of striving to be the best that we can be.
You won't see yourself on stage now.
And to be clear, again, it's not about me, just a singular
like
Palestinian, somebody who shares who we are.
I just want to broaden it past, just because you mentioned your state, Georgia, and I was going to get into it later, but you mentioned it now. This idea of being a swing state, when we talk about swing states, and I want to come back to Michigan, Andy, you mentioned it earlier, obviously we talk about Arab Americans in Michigan, but this is way beyond Arab Americans. You're in Georgia, where we know 11,000 votes.
780.
Split. We know because Donald Trump called up and said, find me those votes. And yet, I believe 6,000 uncommitted, or I think it's called, what was it called in Georgia? It was a different name.
Leave it blank.
Leave it blank. 6,000 people left it blank in the primaries. That number may be bigger today, given what's happened over the last few months. And the New York Times reported that black pastors in Georgia were leading the movement against this genocide and calling for a ceasefire. This is not just about Arab Americans in the tent. This is, as Andy mentioned earlier, young people, black people, Jewish people.
Yeah, I mean, to be very clear, our multi-faith, multi-racial, multi-generational coalition that has grown on this in Georgia is the reason I'm still alive today. I could not bear the weight of everything that has happened without them. What we saw in Georgia truly was the future of this country. And to see that be ignored, particularly when the stakes are so high, and I want to be clear, me as an elected official, I care about my constituents. I want to keep them safe as much as humanly possible. And I'm Palestinian, and now I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place of what do I do ahead of November? How can I turn out my community, who, by the way, there's 76,000 registered Muslims in the state of Georgia. There are 55,000 Arabs, and we're not really sure how many of those are registered to vote, but those are still way larger than the margin of victory for President Biden. And I'm concerned, and the only reason I'm here, the only reason any of us are trying this hard is because we want to be able to deliver those votes come November.
Andy, I spoke to someone in the DNC a few months ago, and I said, what about Michigan? Aren't you worried? This is when Biden was still the candidate. Aren't you worried about Michigan? And they said, no, we think we can win Michigan with suburban women on abortion and auto workers and labor. We don't need Arab Americans or young people. What's your reaction to that?
Imagine saying you want to forego your most enthusiastic demographic. You know, young people might not turn out to elections to the same degree as older folks, but like young people are the ones who like fill up volunteer slots to knock doors and phone bank, etc. Like they're the ones who put in the extra work to turn out those older voters too, you know? Let's abandon our most ardent supporters who are going to be lifelong supporters of the party if we do this right. Yeah, we don't need them. The political calculus in Washington, D.C. is moronic in the extreme. The traditional like political calculations are insane to me.
You know, I for one thing, there's so many Arab Americans are auto workers. Yes. I just have to say, you know, thousands and thousands. We have 300,000 Middle East, North African people. We're beyond our Arab American population. We're a big Muslim state of, other black Muslims, South Asian Muslims, right? You mentioned the black pastors, bishops of the AME Church, right, called out this issue. Yes. Thousands of black pastors around the country. So it's an issue that cuts across the progressive base, the base of the Democratic Party in Michigan. And I particularly want to call out one thing about Michigan that we're super proud of. We have done, and we're recognized for this. The Roosevelt Institute just put out a little report. Michigan's done the best of any state on what you might call democratic, with a small d, democratic hygiene. Same day, no vote registration, motor voter, no reason absentee, college students being able to vote where they are studying. You can register and vote right up till the polls close, on and on. From 2018 to 2022, Michigan increased its youth vote more than any other state. And in 2022, we had the highest vote rate of youth voting. And then, what are we going to squander all this?
Yeah, the DNC and like traditional political thinking is that don't waste your time on new media, like streaming or YouTube. Those are wastes of time. You want to focus on where the real action is. Calling elderly people who don't use caller ID. That's where the real money is. That's where you really turn out the votes. Unironically, I'm not kidding. To traditional Washington political organizers, you don't like turn to like social media websites. You don't turn to like anything except for two things. Your calling list and your email list. Those are the newest things in Washington political organizing. The only people in town who are like focusing on organizing like new media among streamers and like YouTubers and stuff, the only game in town for that is like Progressive Victory. That's it. That's it. And they're a relatively small and new group, guys. The rest of Washington is hung up on, we just need to get the email lists. Yeah, the email lists that, because young people all look at their spam folders these days. It's insane. It's actually insane. It's 2024.
Because young people are so deeply into this issue. And you have to just, I don't think the people understand in the campaign or in the DNC. On a college campus in Michigan, since we're by far the most densely Arab American state, like if we're a bunch of sophomores in our dorm, or if we're a bunch of students in a frat or a sorority or in a dining hall, there are Palestinian Americans in our friend groups. And let's say we're all students here, let's say none of us are political, right? And a Palestinian American friend runs in crying, what's the matter? 12 of my cousins were just wiped out. Their apartment block was imploded by a 2,000-pound bomb. We're all going to start crying. We're all going to start hugging. We're never going to forget this moment for the rest of our lives. And this, all of a sudden, our parents are going to be like, what happened to you? You're all political. Because we're all part of that friend's cause. Because we can't stand for it. So.
Yeah, and there's honestly an element of this, and they touched on it earlier about like how the element of invisibility is by design. It's both by design and by negligence, because the DNC's calculation is that, there aren't enough Palestinians to actually matter in the grand scheme of like a general election. Except that those Palestinians know people. And those people know people. And like the effect of like someone's entire family getting wiped out reverberates outward from them and affects their friends and their families. And like, it is not an isolated event. It's not an isolated, invisible, uncared about thing. Because human beings, we tend to care for each other. And that might be an idea that's, anathema to the very existence of the DNC. Certainly seems like it anyway. But people care about each other. And they care about the issues that affect their friends and families. And to write that off is the height of stupidity and arrogance, which puts it firmly within the DNC's purview, I suppose.
Look, I don't want Donald Trump anywhere near the White House ever again. I've said from the beginning of my support for these amazing young organizers like Layla, who created this, Listen to Michigan movement that became...
Yeah. Stoudman says, one of the most important and credible people I've met in my life is my friend Mia, a Palestinian American, and definitely one of the primary reasons that this hits so hard. Her family is being slaughtered. Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to sit by while you watch your friends lose everything because of cruel and inhuman American political policy.
The uncommitted national movement. I was going to vote for Biden. I'm definitely voting for Harris. But I want to help her win Michigan. Yes. You can't win the White House without winning Michigan because of the stupid Electoral College, right? You need those Michigan's Electoral College, 15 Electoral College votes. And maybe you can win Michigan but any sensible organizer.
You don't want to be complacent with our stupid Electoral College and Donald Trump neck and neck in the polls.
Yes.
Layla, let me ask you this. And I do want to come back to Michigan, and you're from Dearborn, I know. But just on the policy front, let's say we started this conversation talking about this kind of quote-unquote breaking news this evening here on a Wednesday evening in Chicago that there isn't going to be a Palestinian voice on the DNC stage before it's over tomorrow night. But let's say they had put a Palestinian voice on stage. Let's say they had put Ruah on stage and we heard a great speech and we heard Palestinian humanity expressed from the podium. But then the policy still didn't change. You'd still leave Chicago with Palestinians.
I live right next to Dearborn, Michigan. There is no way to hide your head in the sand because everyone is touched by this. Yeah. Yeah. And Michigan is a swing state. If you like it doesn't even take a politician who cares about the issue. It takes a politician who wants to win to actually want to address this issue. And it is incredibly infuriating that it has not been addressed yet.
Is being killed with American bombs. And the policy that you are now calling for is some form of arms embargo, conditioning of aid.
Yeah, because it's not enough to call for a ceasefire. You need an actual course of action to get that ceasefire. What are you going to do? Like, yelling at Benjamin Netanyahu in a private meeting doesn't count. You need to actually do something.
Kamala Harris's former national security advisor said on a panel a few days ago there will be no conditioning of aid in her view. Phil Gordon, who's the current national security advisor to the vice president, put out a tweet.
Well, that's true. Dr. Delitis, you could win Michigan without the Arab American vote. Sure. The same way, hypothetically, you could win like a southern state without the black vote. But it's not a good idea to try and do that.
The day after you met with Harris saying she doesn't support an arms embargo. So it's not looking good on the policy front. Or is there do you think there's some place for some movement at some point?
Yeah, like the arms embargo is really just asking for the United States' own laws to be put into effect. Like, it's really just saying, hey, the Leahy law should have been invoked months ago. Like, this isn't controversial. The guy who wrote that law says it should be enacted. Like, it is honestly the most common sense thing you could possibly, like, articulate. And you can even point to the fact that it's in accordance with U.S. law that you have an arms embargo of Israel based on existing U.S. law.
I do think, in having a speaker on the stage of the Democratic National Convention was a demand that we had, a movement demand that we had of the DNC.
Yeah.
It is not the demand of our movement overall, is just to have a speaker.
Yes, it was one.
But the party platform was revealed on Monday. And that party platform stated that the Democratic Party values Palestinian and Israeli lives equally.
Yeah.
How did they signal that this week during the Democratic National.
By the way, in case people don't know what the Leahy Law is, it's basically U.S. law that prohibits the U.S. State Department or the Department of Defense from sending military assistance to foreign military units that violate human rights law, which Israel is absolutely doing, like, every day. Like, in a documented fashion. It's not like, oh, you really have to dig for it. You know, you don't. You just like Google what have they done today.
Convention, not having one Palestinian American speaker.
And even though you guys turned up with 700,000 votes under your belt.
Yeah, they've had
700,000 more than some of the pro-Harris Republicans.
Exactly. Not only they had Republicans speak on that stage,
Yeah,
they
it's more
even
what you
had
would call
Border Patrol
guidelines,
officers
yeah.
speak on that stage. But they couldn't find one Palestinian to
But they
be
could
on
find, they just don't want to
They
give
just
them.
didn't want
So
it.
you, you found them, one of them's right
It is
here.
almost like our tears, our pain, our suffering doesn't matter. You know, my sister Rashida often says that a Palestinian child's cries is no different than an Israeli child's cries.
True.
But what just happened this week and the fact that our request was denied signal to all of us that it is not true, that they do not value our lives the same. And when it comes to policy, the least that we could do, this administration and Vice President Harris could do, is follow our own justice system.
Yes.
Because right now we are violating, right now we are in violation of our own laws, Leahy law
Yep.
and international law.
Which says you can't use weapons, you can't provide weapons to where human rights violations are being documented. Let me ask you this, Andy, quick question on, Layla mentioned her sister Rashida, Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib of Michigan, who isn't at the DNC this year. Let me ask you this question, Andy. The only Palestinian American in Congress was censured by Congress in the midst of all this. Not the Republicans who said turn Gaza into a parking lot, who made genocidal statements about Palestinians, but the woman who said, I want everyone to be free, but she said, between the river and the sea, you're not allowed to say that. I've got to ask the question, you went up against AIPAC in your own race, you lost in 2022. Are we seeing any movement in terms of the Democrats in Congress changing their positions on Israel-Palestine, standing up to a pro-Israel lobby? I saw a speaker on stage, I can't remember who, on Monday or Tuesday night say, we took on the gun lobby and we beat them. And I think I tweeted, will we ever hear a Democrat say on a DNC stage, we took on the pro-Israel lobby and beat them? Will that day ever come?
Well, I think
God bless Mehdi Hasan, man. He asks such great questions and has like really good insight. This is perfection. This is exactly the kind of journalism that needed to be done in the wake of the DNC.
AIPAC is, becoming, it's completely lost its soul. I mean, and the Democratic Party faces an existential issue over this, not just because of this one issue, but because of what it means to let Republican billionaires come in and determine the outcomes of Democratic primaries, right? But I really, what Congress does on this matters a lot, but I think, and I was a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and I think the Article 1 body, Congress, which holds all the purse strings, including all the foreign, spending we do on all military, humanitarian, everything. I think Congress needs to take its proper role on foreign policy in a stronger way. Like, we have these authorizations for use of military force from forever ago that we don't get rid of. All those should have a time limit and all that. But listen,
yeah, Mehdi Hasan got fired for being too vocally pro-Palestinian.
I think in our tradition, even if we did that, the role of the president in foreign affairs is really strong. And so I want to keep the focus on Vice President Harris. And I'm not giving up.
Focus on Harris, What about Joe Biden? What's going on there? Well, the guy's not even running for re-election anymore.
Well, no. So that's an excellent point.
And he just signed off on, I think, $20 billion.
But I think that Vice President Harris is in a difficult position here, right? She's the vice president. He's the president. But she's who I'm focused on. I don't expect change from President Biden on this.
But Harris should distance herself from Biden?
Well,
because your senator in Michigan, Gary Peters, said recently at Politico that he thinks she holds different views. And when he was asked by the Politico reporter, should she make them clear, he said yes.
Yes, and Gary Peters is a really smart politician who's very careful, and what he says is very considered.
Agreed.
And he's in charge of the Senate, re-election effort to try to hold the majority, which is going to be super tough. So I think there's a significance there. What I really want to emphasize is, as disappointing as not having a speaker is, a Palestinian speaker on stage in prime time, which is very disappointing. To be honest, I'm much more focused on the policy.
Yes.
And the policy is most important. And I am not giving up at all. Look, she just became the nominee. This is crazy. She's filling out her team, right? I want to keep, our eyes on the prize of getting her to say things, as Senator Peters says, that if you have your own views, express them. And I think there's a lot of space for her to do this in a way that would make people in the community feel like, okay, I want to give her a chance. Very few people. Look, Muslims have fundamentalists just like Christians and Jews. So there's these people in Dearborn and every other part who are like, ban books and, no abortion ever. I mean, there are Muslims like that too. So they might vote, Arab American and otherwise. And by the way, in my re-election, when I was strongly supported by the Muslim community, this is something to pay attention to, because some of them would say, oh, we're supporting you and stuff, but you have to do something to protect our children. I'm like, what? And then they would say, like, well, they can't be, I don't want to get off track. But listen, she could say, as Layla said, and when I'm president, we're going to follow U.S. and international law.
Which is what Hubert Humphrey did in '68 to distance himself from LBJ on Vietnam. He did. Narrowed the gap in the polls. He did. In September '68, he finally disowned LBJ, but it was too late.
Too late.
And he lost by 0.7 percentage point.
Yes.
So we don't want to see that happen with Donald Trump benefiting. Roy, I want to come back to you on the convention. Before I do, just Layla, on that point about some people, will never vote for her. Of the uncommitted movement, like what proportion would say, you know what? We're not just trying to, there's a whole punish Biden phrase. We're not about punishing. We do want change. And if there is some kind of indication of change, we'll give her the benefit of the doubt.
There was just a poll that came.
One of the things that I think mainstream media has been incredibly effective at doing is smearing the uncommitted movement as disorganized whiners who have unreasonable demands. And I think what we're finding here with Mediasan elevating their position here is that that's just a lie. These people are not unreasonable. They're not deaf or blind to the political reality that Kamala Harris exists in. Like they said earlier, they're not asking for an overturning of 80 years of US policy. But what they do want, and they're also not sitting there being like, yes, we're going to ensure that Donald Trump wins to punish the Democrats, which is what you see a lot in online left circles or whatever. But what they're saying is, hey, we want to help you win. If you want to win, here's how you can do that. Here's how you can signal to us, Arab Americans, Palestinian Americans, Muslim Americans, that, hey, you are going to do something about this conflict. And in the face of that, of these pretty reasonable suggestions and these very reasonable asks, the DNC just said, how about you guys go fuck yourselves? That's the official position of the DNC. Now, I don't think that the DNC and Kamala Harris are exactly the same entity. I think that Kamala Harris has her own politics separate from that of Joe Biden. And I think that currently Joe Biden is the president. He and his policies and people who agree with him are the people who hold sway in the Democratic Party in the DNC. As a result, I think the DNC is more reflective of that, and Kamala Harris is to an extent kind of caged by that rhetoric and by those policy choices. But that being said, there are if there was a time to throw your weight around as Kamala Harris in this scenario, the DNC would have been it. Saying, hey, I am going to be president. This is what I need from you. get one of them on stage, or I'm going to remember who said no to me. You know, like that's what you need. We needed like an actual application of her power. And this isn't a situation in which like people are like, oh, Kamala Harris secretly controls the border and is doing nothing about the border crisis because they call her a border czar, and like she doesn't have any actual power to affect that change. You know, she can't undo Biden's policy as vice president. Like, that's not how that works. But she could have thrown her weight around at the DNC more. Maybe it's something that like slipped through the gaps, but it's rough. To add my thoughts to that question, I don't think anything will change until our politicians can't have personal stake in investments and lobbyist interests that influence their decisions. It won't change until that changes. Well, yeah, and that's another thing. I do think we need to clamp down, and we need to like effectively outlaw lobbying. We need to actually outlaw lobbying, or at the very least, heavily restrict it to such a degree that like, you know, your Nestle company can only like drop $200 into lobbying instead of $200 million into lobbying. You know, we need to undo Citizens United. We need like a constitutional amendment to like get that shit out of our political system. I don't know that it's in the cards right now, unfortunately, but we need to like get more progressive folks into politics, get more progressives on the handle, on the driving wheel, the steering wheel of politics, so we can move in that direction, because lobbying is how capitalism erodes our democracy. And I think we're seeing that. Like we're directly seeing it in like in Donald Trump and in the DNC and AIPAC. We're seeing that. Honestly, it starts with getting the Supreme Court under control. Yeah, it'd be nice to see Kamala Harris get the SCOTUS reforms through. So I don't know. We gotta keep the course.
Came out, I think it was an IMEU poll.
Yes, it was YouGov poll, yeah.
Yes, that said that if Vice President Kamala Harris came out with a policy that saved lives right now, a form of an arms embargo,
yes,
that she would win those key swing states.
Yes, I think more than a third of voters
Yes.
were more likely to vote for
Yes,
her.
more likely to vote for her.
Yeah.
And so these are folks.
A third of all voters, by the way. A third of all voters. 33% of all voters are more likely to vote for Harris if she supports like policies that would bring an end to the conflict in Gaza.
Who do not, these are Democratic voters who don't want to see Trump elected, but want their children and their family members and their communities here and abroad to be protected. Because let's not ignore what has happened here in the last few months. It hasn't been just the rise of anti-Semitism, but there's been a rise in anti-Arab hate, Islamophobia, anti-Palestinian hate. Wadia El-Fayyoumi from Illinois was stabbed to death for being Palestinian. The 3 men from Vermont, one who's going to be paralyzed for the rest of his life.
Yes.
And the mother from Texas who literally had to save her children from being drowned by a racist.
That's a very good point.
And,
that all has to be part of this conversation.
And all of this has to be a part of this conversation.
On that note, we actually saw an act of violence against a Muslim woman in a headscarf here at the DNC this week. I don't know if you saw the video. There was
I forgot to bring that up yesterday, but yeah, one of the delegates at the DNC who was Muslim got beaten with one of the Kamala Harris signs at the event. Insane stuff.
a guy with a I love Joe Biden flagpole on tape on Monday night, I think it was, leant forward and hit a protester who was peacefully, quietly just unfurling
a delegate, a Democratic, a Harris delegate.
Hit her on the head. I'm amazed that that person hasn't been found, hasn't been banned, hasn't been suspended, hasn't been asked to leave. I mean, we've just normalized Islamophobia and anti-Arab hate, as later pointed out. How is that? I can't imagine any other community, any other minority, religious or racial, that happening on camera, in prime time, in an arena, and there's no outcry, no condemnation from the DNC leadership, no punishment.
I mean, to be clear, I don't know who the delegate was that had the sign. I don't even think they may even know, but I do want to share this because I think this is the part that keeps getting missed in these viral videos and polarization, increased polarization. Because to Leila's point, The reason uncommitted is so powerful is it showed, not just told, about what people were feeling when it came to the presidential cycle in a way that could not be spun away in key swing states. That's what makes this so powerful. And the reason we are worried, and to your point about the convention, is that, again, the biggest applause lines were when we heard about a ceasefire. If you walk through the halls of the convention, so many, I would say the majority of people are wearing kufiyas, are wearing uncommitted paraphernalia, they've got pins, they've got flags, they've got, I mean, I have never, ever, I'm 31 years old, I have never seen this kind of care for Palestinians in my entire life. And so the part that I don't understand is that we're—
Here, I found the video.
Was I told who we had to meet?
Can you actually hear it?
Who we had to meet? Was I told you that?
Yeah, just look at that. This guy is leaning down over an entire row of people to smash that delegate in the head.
Who we had to meet? Was I told you that? Winter of peril and possibility. Peril. Who we had to meet?
Absolutely insane.
Who we had to meet?
Yeah, you can hear it. That's crazy. Do you know how loud something has to be for you to hear it in a packed stadium from this far away on a cell phone? Like camera recording? Like, my goodness. They still haven't found that guy.
We're allowing that image to take hold about the DNC when we literally
the actual
have
base is on site.
Exactly, literally.
I was just on my way here from the United Center and someone stopped me and said, please keep speaking for Palestine, a delegate.
Exactly.
So then there's a disconnect, right? This is why American democracy is in trouble, where it's not just Palestine, there's multiple issues where the public are in one place and the elected representatives are in another, partly because of lobby groups, partly because of other interests. But you're optimistic, Adaf. I get a sense from you that you're still optimistic.
Well, I
or
think,
hopeful.
I
It's
think,
a different thing.
I tell you what. I think Rua and Layla are here, right? And I'm here. I was in the hall the last 2 nights. It's electric.
Yeah.
People are so excited. I'm so grateful to Joe Biden that he stepped aside after that disastrous debate. I think he did, you know, I have many problems with, especially about certain foreign policy things, but I was so proud to serve with him in the 117th Congress and all the legislation we passed on climate change, which is getting way too little attention here, climate change, and, you know, investing in America and blah, blah, blah. But to be a Palestinian American here and all that electricity and excitement and this first Indian American black woman president ever on, you know, and you're not part of it.
Yeah,
you're somehow, why aren't we part of that? I think that's very upsetting to people. And I think a lot of delegates, the very people crying such real tears over, like, imagine the pain of a parent, you know, with a 23-year-old son who's been, you know, in captivity. That's a war crime, you know, for 300, however many days. And then your pain isn't part of it too. And I don't understand how that helps the party. I don't think it helps the party.
I don't think it helps.
I think it's not a good idea.
Before we run out of time later, where does uncommitted go from here? From Chicago?
That's an excellent
You know,
question.
we were really hoping to leave Chicago and be able to mobilize voters, especially in key swing states like Michigan, so we have that fighting chance in November. In all honesty, we will continue talking about the dangers of a Trump presidency because we know what that's going to mean, not just for us here that are organizing and advocating for human rights for Palestine, but we know how much worse it's going to be for Palestinians. We already know that Donald Trump uses Palestinian like—
Can we, like, take a moment? Like, so much respect to these organizers for the uncommitted movement because they understand, like, the political reality that Donald Trump will be worse in every conceivable way for Palestinian Americans and also Palestinians living in, you know, the occupied territories, right? They understand that. But they also understand the very real problem of mobilizing voters. Because a lot of voters aren't going to be moved by Trump bad rhetoric. You know, they're not going to be moved by that because, well, frankly, they look at it and they see, well, both candidates aren't going to do much for me, so, you know, I'm going to stay home, or I'm going to vote for Jill Stein because I just can't stomach voting for Kamala Harris, someone who might not do anything about this horrific genocide. While I disagree with that stance, it's also not a stance that can really be argued with that much, you know, like at least successfully. Like I can list a bunch of reasons why Trump would be worse than Harris when it comes to this particular issue, but that's not going to move someone who feels like who might feel like if they vote for Kamala Harris, they're voting for more of their people being killed and slaughtered. I think that the best thing to do is to vote for Harris, but like that's not going to be a compelling argument for a lot of people. A lot of Palestinian Americans, a lot of allies of Palestinian Americans, a lot of people who are disillusioned with the political process. And that's what makes the DNC snub so much worse here. Because these are people who are Democrats and who are willing to work towards mobilizing people who might not otherwise be willing to turn out. And to that group of people, the friendliest people to them, they gave them a very firm, go fuck yourselves. And now these people are left in the lurch, and like they're like, well, we'll tell people that Donald Trump is going to be bad, but we're also going to tell you right here, right now, that that's not going to be enough for a lot of the folks who were expecting us to be able to take something back to them after the DNC. And that's on the DNC.
Like it's an ethnic slur.
Yes.
We know that he has promised his mega donors to annex the West Bank, where my family is currently lives, to be part of Israel.
Jared's got his eyes on.
Yeah.
Yeah. The reason, by the way, the reason Donald Trump has been all over Miriam Adelson is because she gave him a ton of money. I think it was over $100 million she's funneling to his campaign because he committed to her that he would allow Israel to annex the entirety of the West Bank. So,
I mean,
property in Gaza.
He literally, when he was president during his administration, he moved the United States Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, a direct attack on Palestinian right to self-determination.
Oh, yeah. My rear end, absolutely, you can argue against voting for Jill Stein. Jill Stein is like funded by the Russian government and is basically a psyop to sow discord in American politics. But like, I'm not going down that rabbit hole right now.
And we know that he's already said in Project 2025 that the type of work.
The main thing I will say is just that like, third party politics in America don't work and won't ever work until we get a ranked choice voting system in every state in the country. Until that time, power just consolidates into the Democrats and the Republicans. That's just mathematically how that works out. In fact, just real quick, Veritasium, the YouTube channel Veritasium, actually just put out a very, very interesting video about the mathematics of voting systems. And I would highly recommend you guys check it out. It's a very, very informative video that it provides a very succinct and good explanation of how ranked choice voting works and why it is better than a first past the post system. But also talks about some of the issues mathematically when it comes to a lot of different voting systems. And I think it's worth knowing all of those things. Good video. I would watch it with you guys and talk about it more in depth, except I'm pretty sure that they copyright their videos. So just want to shout it out. It's a good video.
That I'm doing, that the uncommitted movement is doing, is going to be movements that are going to be
Amanda
criminalized.
Smash, how you doing?
So we know how much worse it's going to be, not just for us, but the communities we love and care about.
But a lot of liberals in that convention center, a lot of blue, no matter who partisans will say, But you're to blame if he wins.
No.
That's what they'll say.
Asking our electeds and our candidates for presidency to listen to the core base of their voters.
Well, it's Bianca Toth. It's not that we can never have a multi-party system. It's that mathematically, what most states have is what's called first past the post voting. And that mathematically tends to, over time, boil down to two main consolidated parties. If you want a different outcome, if you want like a multi-party system, then what we need to do is to organize on a local and state level and build power to get ranked choice voting. And that is something that multiple states have now adopted. So the issue is, if that's like your desired outcome, you need to organize to that outcome outside of just the every 4 years presidential election cycle, because the presidential election cycle isn't where you're going to get like third-party breaks, really. What you need to do is build local and statewide power first in order to achieve the transition to ranked choice voting. And then when enough states have that ranked choice voting system, multi-party systems will be viable. So it's not that it's impossible for us to have multi-party systems, it's just impossible for us to have it right now unless we organize to that end. If we organize, anything is possible. If we organize, we can get Medicare for all. If we organize, we can get worker ownership of the means of production. We can do all kinds of amazing things, but only if we organize.
Which 86% of Democratic voters want a permanent immediate ceasefire. And I think it's 53% want conditioning on funding to Israel. People do not want to see our tax dollars being used to kill innocent men, women, and children.
But at the end of the day, come November, Kamala Harris does not shift on this.
That is something that she has to answer to. When has...
Will you vote for her in November if she doesn't shift?
Right now, I need to see a policy change.
I think asking someone from the uncommitted movement if they're going to commit to voting for Kamala Harris is an inherently funny question to ask, and I appreciate that Mehdi Hassan asked it.
Change how she's going to protect people that I love and care about. And I cannot recommend a vote for her in this moment. Right now.
You're an activist and organizer.
Yeah, but I know how dangerous Trump is.
Rora's an elected Democrat. And I asked you at the beginning, and I'll ask you again as we wrap up. Somebody comes to you and says, how are you voting? I'll follow your lead.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that I wish people followed my lead when it comes to voting. That's why we're here. That's why we are raising the alarms. I mean,
Boy, howdy, it'd be so much easier to organize if people did.
You know, we might be in two different places, but again, I'm an elected official. I am around a very different group of people, and so where my mind is very different. But I do know for a fact, if I texted the WhatsApp groups that I'm in right now, and I said, I need you to vote for Kamala Harris after what just happened this week, they're literally gonna tell me I have no shame. And the thing is, the point of this week was to try to reduce that anger. It was because
it would have been a very different WhatsApp conversation tomorrow night if you were coming off a stage having spoken about your grandfather.
But I want to make this note because I feel like nobody is talking about this. In 2016, a very sophisticated mis- and disinformation campaign effectively suppressed the vote. There is the same kind of suppressive campaign happening right now online using this very issue because it is very real and it is very visceral. And
She is making an incredibly good point here. And that also plays into what I was talking about earlier in stream about how you need to be aware of where you're getting your information, where you're getting your rhetoric, where you're getting your talking points, because it might turn out that you're actually getting convinced not to vote and not to turn out by Republican ad spend, by conservatives who are paying for propaganda. And I love that she's bringing this up.
It is dividing our communities, and my worry isn't just for the election, it's what's going to happen after when our party is dependent on a broad and beautiful coalition.
The Broad and Beautiful Coalition is still fighting to survive. I think we'll leave it on that note. Andy Levin, Ruhr Rahman, Leila Al-Abed, thank you all for coming here in Chicago. Thank you to the wonderful Oud Cafe for hosting us. Mehdi Unfiltered will be back next week.
I want to go to that cafe. It looks really good.
Please do tune in and make sure you're subscribed to Zeteo. Thanks so much.
Folks, please go subscribe to Zeteo. I cannot recommend it highly enough. Mehdi Hassan and his team are just doing incredible, incredible work building up the position here of, frankly, quality journalism. We need more of it. And my goodness, was that a necessary conversation to have? And I hope that I added context and like was able to add to that, because it's so good for more people to see this, you know?